This is the story of riding my bike from Jasper, Alberta, Canada to Antelope Wells, New Mexico, along the Great Divide. In the previous episode, I entered the United States and rode through the bulk of Montana. I also met Carl, a fellow bikepacker on the Divide route, and rode with him until we left off at Bannock State Park. In this episode, my friend Tracy joins me for 2 weeks. Together, we cover the rest of Montana, the Idaho section, all of Wyoming, and a little bit of Colorado. Tracy and I did a hut-to-hut tour from Grand Junction, Colorado to Moab, Utah in May of 2022. We had such a great time together that she offered to join me at the start of my Divide trip. But just before we were set to go, she broke a bone in her wrist and was forced to stay home and rest. Luckily, she healed quickly and was able to join me in Montana. Her now brother-in-law dropped Tracy and her bike off at Bannock State Park campground to start her 2 weeks riding with me. Today was a day of goodbyes and hellos. I said goodbye to Carl, then later that morning, Tracy arrived. I was so happy to see her. It was fun to see Tracy's excitement to ride, all of her cool gear, and her willingness to jump into the adventure. Today's ride ended up being pretty tough, even for just 35 miles. The wind made our work hard, except for a brief break with the tailwind on tarmac. We were steadily climbing, and it was hot with no trees for cover. Towards the end of the ride, we found a place to wild camp where a creek wound its way onto public land. The camping wasn't ideal, just a ditch really, with sage poking everywhere and rocks and burrs, but we made it work. Today started out with climbing out of the valley. First a gradual slope and then a big push-a-bike to the top. The downhill that followed was welcome. We rode through a gorgeous canyon area that followed a creek that became progressively bigger and stronger. That was the best part of the day. I wish I had stopped to put my feet in the water. It looked so inviting. We got to Lima early, like 1 p.m., and we were able to get a room in the most run-down and dirty motel ever, but it was perfect. Leaving unknown camp spot, wild camp spot, and heading toward Lima, Montana. It's a beautiful day. This stretch of road was especially barren and uninhabited. Fields of sage extended to the surrounding mountain ranges, which came to feel as if they were positioned precisely to keep us contained. Eventually, we turned onto Big Sheep Creek Road and encountered dramatic canyon walls and views of the spring-fed Sheep Creek. We were elated by the beautiful scenery, a reminder that luck changes quickly on the Divide. Once in Lima, we checked into our motel and quickly started our evening rituals of laundry and convenience store resupply before we sat down with our maps and planned out the next several days. Today was my first longer ride in a while, 76 miles. The first third was really hard for me, just long, steady climbs as we moved through the high plains. We were riding in a bowl, surrounded by sage-covered, round-top mountains. We rode past the Lima Dam and a massive reservoir. Later, we pedaled around the Red Rock Lakes National Wildlife Refuge, where we saw all kinds of shorebirds, sandhill cranes, a horned lark, and tons of mountain bluebirds. The rough roads made progress slow, but after one big final climb, we descended to Henry's Lake and the Red Rock RV campground. In Montana, I think this is day 19, and we're on our way to Red Rock RV Park, and it's a beautiful day. The RV park charged us only $20 each to camp, and we had a little store right there. We immediately bought a huge chocolate milk, took a shower, and did laundry. So spoiled. Today was a treat. We started on pavement, but soon found ourselves riding in the woods on 2-track. I was so glad Tracy got to experience that style of riding on the route. We met a New Zealand couple traveling northbound, and they gave us good intel on the Coulter Bay hiker-biker sites. We had a grocery store stop early on, where I got everything I needed except gas for my stove. After that, we took a kind of unremarkable, out-of-the-way road to Big Creek and back, finally landing on a deep gravel 2-track forest road. There was one section of hike-a-bike up a power line. Finally, the deep gravel gave way to regular dirt, and we started to see incredible views of the warm river and an old mining transom. We rolled right into our campground from the trail and found a site right on the river. We sat in the river and cooled our tushes and sore muscles. I am losing track, but we are leaving our little campground and heading towards Warm River. Very pretty. Oh.
The heart springs loud. Far from ever feeling lost with me. I'll push you back towards the land sea. Let go without love and love is free. Stick with me and I will guarantee you're never lost among the crowd with me. Never lost among the crowd with me. Everywhere you go, I'll be. Anywhere you go, I'll see. You're never lost among the crowd with me.
The catbirds and ospreys acted as alarm clocks this morning. Our route started with a paved climb, then followed a beautiful river for a while. Then suddenly we were in farmland, maybe wheat and potatoes. Next it was back into the woods and more climbing, a plateau and a series of more increasing climbs. We stopped at mile 50 for lunch at Flag Ranch, then made the final climbs into Coulter Bay, where we were rewarded with glorious views of the Tetons.
I'll push you back towards the land and sea.
It's a climbing day, going to Coulter Bay.
Stick with me and I will guarantee you're never lost among the crowd with me. Never lost among the crowd with me. Everywhere you go, I'll be. Anywhere you go, I'll see. You're never lost among the crowd with me. Crowd with me. Never lost among the crowd with me. Everywhere you go, I'll be. Anywhere you go, I'll see. Even though we all please.
The hardest part about today was having the Tetons at our back. We turned around often and were always surprised when we could still see our Tetons. But eventually, we climbed over the divide and lost them for good. Today's ride blissfully started on tarmac with some rolling climbs, so we were able to put a lot of miles behind us before the hard work started. We veered off the tar onto a gravel road. From there, it was up, up. We stayed on that gravel road, which eventually turned into more of a 2-track trail, until we popped out at Togwotee Mountain Lodge around mile 30. We had a convenience store lunch in the shade, then continued to finish the climb to the top of Togwotee Pass. Throughout much of the day, we had sweeping views of the valley below. A couple of electronic signs on wheels at the side of the road warned us to keep bears wild, do not stop for bears. This, of course, set the expectation that we would see bears while we were cycling this stretch. My eyes continually scanned the river valley and mountainside for bears while climbing, thankfully taking my attention away from the work. After some road descending, we veered off to a Forest Service road that wound around the edge of a mountain. It was beautiful. Eventually, we popped back out onto the tarmac, and after descending at 35 or more miles per hour, we found our lodge, a no-frills place with clean rooms, spotty Wi-Fi, a limited menu, an even more limited store, and free use of the laundry machine, plus sun and winds to quickly dry our clothes. Nothing's better than that. One thing you learn quickly when riding the divide is that if a climb shows up on an elevation profile, it's a significant climb. Today we had multiple significant climbs as we went up and eventually over Union Pass. When the trail descended into valleys, we'd be treated to beautiful creek views where dippers waded and fished in the shallows. At the height of our climb today, I brought out my stove and cooked ramen for lunch. It did little to replenish my body for over this 7-hour day. A final rocky and technical descent brought our exhausted bodies into the Whiskey Grove campground. The Mountain Ranch and going to Whiskey Creek, something, I don't know, campground. This morning we stopped at the Tie Hack Memorial. Tie hacks were a special breed of loggers who could quickly fell, limb a tree, and fashion the tie down to specifications demanded. They contributed to the first transcontinental railroad linking our country from coast to coast. Look what we get to do. That's very fun. When we got to camp, Tracy and I sat in the Green River to cool off and soak our achy muscles. For dinner, we had dehydrated meals we had purchased days before. They didn't feel like enough calories. I went to bed absolutely exhausted at 7 p.m. Today's ride was much easier. Dirt turned to tarmac, the wind was at our backs, and we seemed to fly downhill into Pinedale. At just 35 miles, this ride would allow us the recovery we'd need for a longer day tomorrow. Whiskey Grove Campground, heading towards, what's the name of the town? Pinedale. Maybe day 24, question mark, I don't know. It's a beautiful morning. Once we were in town, we resupplied at the local bike shop and outdoor stores and bought a ton of food before we headed to the home of our Warm Showers hosts, Christy and Clay. We hung out with our hosts, their adorable pets, and a fellow rider named Laura while Christy got dinner ready. We asked our hosts if they'd ever had all women cyclists stay with them at one time, and they said it was a first. While we were chatting, a moose strolled through the backyard and began snacking on the neighbor's landscaping. Later, the moose, who was probably a juvenile, went down to the pond and waded in there for a bit. Before it retreated from the yard, it seemed like it got a little spooked and kicked up its legs and huffed. Our dinner was an amazing spread of chicken, corn on the cob, homemade mashed potatoes, and salad. We had ice cream for dessert. I felt completely spoiled and refueled for the hard next 3 days. Tracy and I have been watching the wind forecast for crossing the Great Basin and had been going back and forth on a strategy to cross it. After a good rest at Pinedale, we felt we had the energy to go almost 90 miles to Atlantic City, which would put us in a better spot for hopefully getting a jump on the winds for crossing the Basin the next day. We attempted a last-minute shortcut today, which shaved off 4 miles from our route, but brought us onto a sketchy 2-track ranch access trail with punchy climbs. Later, we rode into South Pass City, a well-preserved ghost town, before climbing out towards Atlantic City with a storm at our backs. Leaving Pinedale, making a break for Atlantic City today. I was glad that we started with a good breakfast at the Wrangler Cafe in Pinedale this morning. The food fueled us for miles. The pavement and downhill grade, maybe a tailwind, really propelled us along too. Clouds picked up as the day went on, threatening storms. Just 4 miles out of Atlantic City, we saw a couple that had turned back towards us because of lightning ahead. Behind us was a wall of clouds. We decided to go for it. Big drops of rain started to fall, but we pushed on, running on adrenaline. We made it to our lodging, the Miner's Delight. The caretaker advised us to go directly to town to get dinner because restaurants tend to open and close sporadically there. Earlier that day, we met a couple, KK and Gomati, who told us about their plans to credit card cross the Basin. Worried about the projected winds and storms, we said, "Tell us more." They gave us the number of a taxi service they weren't going to use. That night, Tracy and I weighed our options. Face the winds and weather, wait it out here and lose a couple of days, or credit card cross the Basin, and then enjoy more riding together in Colorado. We finally decided on the shuttle, with the bonus that I would get my first 0 day. The next morning, we met a CDT thru hiker who went by Billy Goat. We enjoyed hearing his stories over a full breakfast at the inn. Later, Marlene from Gator Taxi arrived. She showed up in a denim miniskirt, sleeveless top, and sparkle pendants. She was driving her own truck and didn't want a single scratch on it. The caretaker helped us get our bikes loaded and gave us a blanket to protect the tailgate. 20 miles into the ride, Marlene stopped to help a stranded rider. His name was Gunner. On the ride, Tracy learned about Gunner's off-the-grid life, and I learned about Marlene's family. We were an odd conglomeration of people and backgrounds, brought together in this moment by the divide. Today we rode the last section of the Basin, about 30 miles, giving us a sample of what we jumped the day before. Tracy and I worked in pairs to battle the 25-mile-per-hour wind, but truthfully, Tracy pulled a lot more because she's stronger. What started as rolling terrain turned into some long climbs, and then the second half of the day was pretty much about gaining elevation. We continued upward into the Route State Forest. Luckily, we'd filled our water bottles at the first good creek we'd seen all day because the informal campsite where we'd planned to camp turned out not to have water. Exhausted, we pushed on past our planned mileage, hoping to find water and camping by the Sandy Creek cabin. Think of the wind, Tracy! When we cycled down the short drive to reach the Sandy Creek cabin, there was a person on the porch. She said, "Hi, Katrina. Hi, Tracy." I was baffled. A second ago, we were kind of in distress trying to find a place to camp, and now somebody was saying hello to me? It turned out to be Gomati and KK, who we'd met the day before last and who had given us the contact information about the shuttle. They told us that they had rented the cabin in advance, months ago. We asked if we could pitch a tent near them, and they said, "No, come in. We have an extra room with bunks." Was I dreaming? There was a shower here, electricity, and a cooking stove. We were saved again and enjoyed preparing and eating dinner with our new friends. Today was a shorter day, especially after pushing additional miles the day before. Our plan was to stay at the Brush Mountain Lodge, another famous stop along the Great Divide route. After a few punchy climbs, we were rewarded with an extended downhill as we crossed into Colorado. Yay, a new state! We had to climb up to Brush Mountain Lodge, but it was so worth it. We were greeted right away with a hug from the owner, Kirsten. While I'm enjoying this descent, I might as well tell you that aero bars make great drying racks. Today, it's my wool camp underwear, but I often use them to dry my spare chamois. Once in a great while, I actually use them for how they're intended. Five cyclists were already at the lodge when we arrived, including Jeff and Lindsay from the day before Atlantic City. Brothers Trevor and Chris stopped later, wondering what the place was, and got sucked into staying. There's a reason riders call the lodge the Vortex. KK and Gomathi, and then Carl arrived too. Kirsten offered to take us to see and swim in a private waterfall on her estate. She hauled us up on her golf cart and gave us instructions to walk the little trail and find a way somehow down the cliff to the falls. We were a funny bunch, all wearing Crocs and sandals to navigate the rocky trail, toting towels and beverages. The falls were beautiful, dropping off a verdant rock face into a chest-deep pool below. We all joyfully splashed and swam, then draped on the nearby boulders to warm in the sun. It was such a magical experience. It was sad to leave the lodge, but I was fueled by Kirsten's pancake breakfast. We climbed right away, continuing our ascent from the day before. Then the climb became aggressively steep, culminating in a 3-mile rocky, mostly hike-a-bike to the summit. Incredibly, Tracy rode most of it on her mountain bike. The descent was rocky and uneven and forced me to slowly pick my lines. Eventually, we reached the Clark General Store and had a great lunch. Shortly after leaving there, we got pelted with sheets of heavy raindrops. We took turns pulling on the downhill tarmac in the rain into Steamboat Springs. Strangely, it was actually really fun. After breakfast, Kirsten insisted on taking a group photo, then stood on the porch and shook a cowbell as we departed. She took this photo. We stopped at the Honey Stinger headquarters in the former Steamboat Springs airport. They were amazing hosts. They gave us a tour and treats, and we even got to meet the CEO. We rode out of town on the Yampa Valley Core Trail that runs through the heart of Steamboat Springs. It's not uncommon to see parents on e-bikes commuting with their kids in tow, while anglers fish in the Yampa nearby. Next, it was on to a lovely dirt road that followed a stream, and then to single track that circled the reservoir. We didn't stop for lunch or take many breaks today. We felt the pressure to get to camp before an approaching rainstorm. We made it just in time. Steamboat Springs to campground somewhere. Got the name. I think all of us enjoyed wading across a small stream towards the end of the day. It was like getting a permission slip to play in the middle of a workday. No sooner than we got our tents up, it started to thunderstorm. I enjoyed lying in my cozy bedding, listening to the raindrops hitting the roof of my tent and thunder shaking through the mountains. Today, Carl asked me, what section of the route would you like to ride again? Without hesitating, I said, none of it. I think he took it as I'm not enjoying the ride. But my answer was really because I couldn't possibly think about riding something over when I wasn't even sure that I'd finish. Every day is a challenge for me. Every ride completed is a victory. I don't need to look back on what I've ridden because tomorrow I'll ride again for hours and the next day. And so on. Today wasn't my best. After a third of the way into the ride, I just cracked. There was supposed to be an extended downhill after a big climb, and in the middle of it, the road builders put in a 7% grade long climb. So unnecessary. I was just done. My bike computer wasn't working, I had stepped in mud and my cleat was clogged, and now this. I stopped in the road and swore. I told the others, go on ahead. I'll just meet them in Kremmling. At my insistence, they continued on. After pushing my bike a while in protest, I finally hopped on and finished the hill. It wasn't quite as bad as it looked. And the downhill to the reservoir below came directly after. I found out when I arrived there that Tracy and Carl hadn't listened to me after all. They were waiting for me. I sheepishly went to wash the mud off my bike and then joined them. I was sorry that I lost it on Tracy's last day, but I put my nose down and pedaled without complaints up the next 2 hills. Tracy even pointed out some bighorn sheep, the first we'd seen so far. We climbed into some amazing views, then descended at high speed toward Kremmling. Ground on the way to Kremmling. Tracy's husband Dave spotted us from his rented pickup truck just outside of town. It felt so strange to see someone familiar in such unfamiliar settings. Later, we'd meet up for lunch, head to the motel we'd booked, and Tracy and Dave would disassemble her bike and pack it up for her flight home. And then, without much further ado, she was gone. I couldn't have asked for a better companion the last 2 weeks than Tracy. I'd miss her enthusiasm, our grocery and convenience store finds, and just her company. I was happy to see she brought the spirit of the trail with her by wearing her Crocs on the plane. In the next episode, I continue through Colorado, climbing multiple passes that are over 10,000 feet. I visit a town that's not very friendly to bikes. I take a rest day in Salida, and I climb the highest pass on the route, plus so much more.
just like a new day, a breath of fresh air in my life. I don't know how, don't know why, but I'll be toasting all my life.